The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and burning incense, a peculiar mix that seemed to seep into every pore of those who stood trembling in the cavernous chamber. The walls glistened faintly under the dim glow of bioluminescent fungi, their soft light casting eerie shadows across the jagged rock formations. It was here, deep beneath the surface of an alien world, that the ritual had been carried out for centuries, a sacred tradition steeped in both reverence and terror. At the center of the chamber loomed the alien queen, her towering form exuding an aura of regality and menace. Her elongated limbs shimmered with iridescent scales that shifted colors like oil on water, while her massive head bore intricate patterns resembling ancient runes etched into bone. A crown of crystalline spikes adorned her brow, each one pulsating faintly with a cold blue light that seemed alive. Her eyes, two enormous orbs glowing with an unnatural intensity, scanned the room with predatory precision, leaving no corner unexamined. Around her neck hung a necklace made from what appeared to be human vertebrae, strung together with sinewy threads that glimmered faintly in the low light. Surrounding the queen were her attendants, smaller but equally formidable creatures whose movements were fluid yet deliberate. Their bodies were covered in chitinous armor plates, reflecting flashes of green and gold as they shifted position. They carried ceremonial weapons forged from materials unknown to humanity, blades that hummed softly as if imbued with some latent energy. Each attendant wore masks carved from obsidian-like stone, their features twisted into grotesque expressions meant to inspire fear. Behind them stood rows upon rows of drones, faceless beings whose sole purpose was to serve without question or hesitation. The humans chosen for this night's sacrifice huddled together near the edge of the sacrificial altar, their faces pale and drawn with despair. Some wept silently, others stared blankly ahead, resigned to their fate. Among them was a young woman clutching a tattered photograph close to her chest, her lips moving soundlessly in prayer. Beside her, an older man gripped his knees tightly, knuckles white against his grimy skin. Fear permeated the very air they breathed, heavy and suffocating, mingling with the metallic tang of blood already spilled during earlier ceremonies. Above it all, the queen raised her clawed hand high, signaling the beginning of the ritual. The attendants moved forward in perfect synchronization, dragging the first victim toward the altar, a crude slab of black stone slick with residue from countless previous sacrifices. As the doomed individual screamed and struggled futilely, the rest of the captives recoiled instinctively, shrinking back against the cold stone walls. The queen watched impassively, her expression unreadable behind the sharp angles of her alien visage. For her, this was not cruelty, it was necessity, a means to maintain balance within her domain. And so the ceremony unfolded, each step precise and ritualistic, echoing through the cavern with haunting clarity. Chants filled the air, guttural syllables spoken in a language older than time itself, reverberating off the walls until it felt as though the entire planet trembled beneath its weight. The flames flickered higher, consuming offerings laid before the queen, fruits grown in shadowy groves, shards of crystal mined from forbidden depths, and fragments of human artifacts scavenged from long-abandoned settlements. Every element served a purpose, every action meticulously planned to appease forces beyond mortal comprehension. Yet amidst the chaos and despair, something stirred at the fringes of the gathering, a presence unnoticed by most, save perhaps the queen herself. He stood apart from the other prisoners, his posture defiant despite the shackles binding his wrists. His eyes scanned the scene before him with calculated calm, betraying none of the panic gripping those around him. This man, unlike the others, did not cower or cry out. Instead, he observed everything, the queen's mannerisms, the rhythm of the chants, the way the attendants positioned themselves around the altar. There was determination in his gaze, a spark of rebellion simmering just beneath the surface. For now, however, he remained silent, biding his time. The moment had not yet come. But when it did, the consequences would ripple far beyond anything any of them could imagine. As the ritual reached its crescendo, the queen stepped closer to the altar, her claws extended and poised above the writhing figure strapped there. Her attendants formed a tight circle around her, their masks gleaming ominously in the flickering light. The chanting grew louder, more frenzied, as if urging her to strike. Yet something held her back. An almost imperceptible hesitation, a flicker of curiosity that momentarily disrupted the flow of inevitability. She turned her head slightly, her luminous eyes locking onto the lone human standing apart from the others. He was different. Not merely because of his composure, though that alone set him apart from the sobbing masses. There was something else, a quiet confidence, an unspoken authority that radiated from him even in chains. His stance was neither submissive nor aggressive. Rather, it conveyed a sense of control, as if he were waiting for precisely the right moment to act. And then, just as the queen's claws hovered inches above the sacrificial victim, he spoke. "Enough!" His voice rang out, clear and commanding, slicing through the cacophony like a blade. The word echoed off the cavern walls, startling even the attendants who faltered mid-chant. Every eye turned toward him, including the queen's, which narrowed into slits of suspicion and intrigue. The drones froze in place, their mechanical precision interrupted by the audacity of his interruption. "You don't have to do this," he continued, taking a cautious step forward despite the restraints binding his wrists. His tone was steady, devoid of fear or desperation, carrying instead a strange resonance that commanded attention. This cycle you've created, it doesn't need to continue. You're smarter than this. Smarter than blind obedience to tradition." A murmur rippled through the assembled crowd, though whether it came from the humans or the aliens was unclear. The queen tilted her head, studying him intently. Her claws retracted slightly, though she remained poised over the altar. For the first time since the ritual began, uncertainty crept into the atmosphere, subtle but undeniable. "What makes you think?" the queen finally responded, her voice a low rumble that vibrated through the chamber, "that your words hold any weight here? You are nothing but prey, brought here to fulfill your purpose." The man didn't flinch. Instead, he straightened further, meeting her gaze with unwavering resolve. "Because I know what you truly want," he said, his voice rising slightly, imbued now with urgency. "You're not doing this out of malice or cruelty. You're trying to protect your people, aren't you? To ensure their survival. But tell me, has this ritual ever truly solved anything? Or has it only perpetuated suffering on both sides?" The queen's mandibles twitched, a sign of agitation among her kind. She took a step back, lowering her claws entirely as she regarded him with growing interest. Around her, the attendants exchanged uneasy glances, their ceremonial weapons wavering slightly in their grasp. Even the drones seemed to hesitate, their programming momentarily overridden by the unexpected turn of events. "You speak boldly for someone facing death," the queen hissed, though there was a note of curiosity underlying her words. "Explain yourself, human. Quickly." He nodded, seizing the opportunity. "Your rituals are based on fear, fear of losing control, fear of extinction. But fear is a poor foundation for progress. If you keep sacrificing us, you'll never understand why we're here in the first place. We're not invaders. We're survivors, just like you. And maybe, just maybe, our survival could benefit yours." The queen's glowing eyes narrowed further, her scaled brow furrowing as she processed his words. The chamber fell silent, save for the faint crackle of the flames and the distant drip of water echoing through the cavern. The tension was palpable, a fragile thread stretched taut between defiance and destruction. No one dared move, least of all the man himself, who stood rooted to the spot, his breath steady but his heart pounding wildly beneath his ribs. For a moment, it seemed as though the queen might dismiss him outright, returning to the ritual with renewed ferocity. But then she lowered her head, her crystalline crown catching the dim light as she considered his proposition. The pause stretched endlessly, each second heavy with possibility. When she finally spoke again, her voice carried a weight that silenced even the faintest whisper. "Prove it," she demanded, her tone laced with skepticism but also something else. Hope, perhaps, or desperation masked as authority. "Prove that your survival can mean anything to mine." The man swallowed hard, knowing full well that the next words out of his mouth could seal his fate, or rewrite it entirely. The silence that followed the queen's demand was deafening, pressing down on everyone present like a physical force. The man took a deep breath, steadying himself as he prepared to speak once more. His mind raced, piecing together fragments of knowledge gleaned from years spent studying these creatures, their culture, and their motivations. He knew this was his only chance, not just for himself but for all those whose lives hung precariously in the balance. "Your rituals," he began, his voice measured yet urgent, "are built on assumptions passed down through generations. Assumptions about us, about humans, as threats, as invaders. But look around you. Do we behave like conquerors? We've been dragged here, forced into submission, stripped of everything we hold dear. What threat could we possibly pose when we're powerless? His words resonated deeply within the chamber, stirring murmurs among the gathered humans. Some clung to hope, others remained skeptical, unwilling to believe that defiance could bring salvation. Meanwhile, the queen's expression remained inscrutable, her glowing eyes fixed intently on him. Encouraged by her continued attention, the man pressed on. You say you perform these sacrifices to maintain balance, to preserve your world and your people. But at what cost? Every life taken weakens both sides. Every drop of blood spilled sows resentment, hatred, and fear. Is that truly balance? Or is it simply perpetuating a cycle of destruction? The queen's mandibles twitched again, betraying a flicker of doubt. Her attendants shifted uneasily, exchanging wary glances as if sensing the precariousness of the moment. One of them stepped forward hesitantly, raising a clawed hand as if to interject, but a sharp glance from the queen silenced them immediately. The man seized the opportunity to drive his point home. Imagine what could happen if you stopped seeing us as enemies and started viewing us as allies. Humans adapt. We always have. We've survived wars, plagues, famine, and disasters you couldn't begin to comprehend. That resilience isn't a threat. It's a strength. A strength that could help you survive too. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. Think about it. Your resources are finite, aren't they? Your environment is changing, becoming harsher, less forgiving. Sacrificing us won't change that. But working with us, sharing knowledge, technology, ideas, that could. Together, we might find solutions neither of us could achieve alone. The queen's posture shifted ever so slightly, her massive frame leaning forward as if drawn in by his argument. Her crystalline crown pulsed faintly, mirroring the rhythm of her thoughts. Around her, the attendants exchanged more furtive looks, their ceremonial weapons lowering incrementally as the tension in the room began to shift. But how can we trust you? One of the masked attendants finally interjected, their voice distorted and guttural. How do we know this isn't some trick to gain freedom? The man turned to face the speaker, his gaze unwavering. Because I'm offering you proof, not promises. Let me show you what humans are capable of. Give me a chance to demonstrate our value. If I fail, then resume your ritual. But if I succeed, if I prove that cooperation benefits us both, you'll have no reason to continue this cycle of violence. The queen straightened, her claws flexing thoughtfully as she weighed his proposal. For a moment, it seemed as though she might reject it outright, dismissing him as a desperate fool grasping at straws. But then she gestured sharply with one hand, silencing the murmurs that had begun to rise among her attendants. Very well, she rumbled, her voice carrying an undertone of reluctant curiosity. You will have your chance. But know this, if your demonstration proves false, your punishment will be swift and absolute. Relief washed over the man, though he kept his expression carefully neutral. He nodded solemnly, acknowledging her terms. Thank you, he said simply, his voice tinged with gratitude. You won't regret this decision. As the queen signaled for her attendants to release him, the chamber erupted into a flurry of activity. The humans, emboldened by his courage, began whispering amongst themselves, their despair giving way to cautious optimism. The drones, however, remained eerily still, their blank faces betraying no emotion as they awaited further instruction. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the oppressive weight of inevitability lifted, replaced by the fragile promise of possibility. Yet even as hope began to take root, the man couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest part was yet to come. Proving his worth would require more than words. It would demand ingenuity, determination, and perhaps even sacrifice of a different kind. But as he stood there, free from his shackles and surrounded by uncertainty, he allowed himself a small, fleeting smile. The ritual had been halted, if only temporarily. And in that pause lay the seed of something greater, a chance to rewrite the story of two species bound by fear and misunderstanding. The queen's decision sent ripples through the cavern, altering the dynamics of power and perception in ways neither side could have anticipated. Her attendants, initially resistant to the idea of deviating from centuries-old traditions, found themselves grappling with doubts they had never dared entertain. The man's words lingered in their minds, planting seeds of questioning that gnawed at the edges of their loyalty. Was this ritual truly necessary, or had it become a crutch for maintaining order? Could there be another path, one less steeped in bloodshed and more aligned with progress? Among the humans, the reaction was equally profound. Those who had resigned themselves to death now clung to the fragile hope ignited by the man's defiance. Whispers of admiration spread like wildfire, transforming him from a mere prisoner into a symbol of resistance. Eyes followed his every movement as he conferred quietly with the queen, his demeanor calm yet resolute. For many, he represented not just survival but redemption, a chance to reclaim agency in a situation where they had none. Yet not everyone shared this newfound optimism. Skepticism brewed among certain factions, particularly among the older captives who had witnessed countless failed attempts at rebellion. They muttered warnings under their breath, cautioning against misplaced faith. "Words won't save us," one elderly man grumbled, his weathered face etched with cynicism. "She'll tire of this game soon enough, and then the blades will fall again." Despite these dissenting voices, the atmosphere in the chamber shifted noticeably. The oppressive dread that had once dominated gave way to a tentative sense of anticipation. Even the drones, typically devoid of emotion, seemed affected by the change. Their mechanical precision faltered occasionally, as if confused by the absence of predictable violence. It was as though the entire ecosystem of the ritual, the symbiotic relationship between fear and compliance, had been disrupted, forcing all parties to recalibrate. Meanwhile, the queen herself appeared conflicted, her usual stoic demeanor marred by subtle signs of unease. She paced slowly around the perimeter of the chamber, her claws clicking softly against the stone floor. Occasionally, she would pause to study the humans, her glowing eyes lingering on individuals who caught her attention. These moments of scrutiny were unnerving, yet they also hinted at a deeper curiosity, an acknowledgement that perhaps not all humans were interchangeable pawns in her grand design. The man noticed this shift and used it to his advantage. With the queen's permission, he began interacting cautiously with the captives, speaking softly to reassure them while subtly gauging their skills and knowledge. He identified engineers, doctors, farmers, and artisans, people whose expertise could contribute meaningfully to proving humanity's worth. His actions did not go unnoticed by the queen, who observed him with increasing interest. There was something compelling about his leadership style, a blend of empathy and strategy that resonated even with her alien sensibilities. However, not all interactions were harmonious. Tensions flared when a group of younger captives, emboldened by the cessation of the ritual, attempted to seize weapons from the distracted attendants. Chaos erupted briefly as shouts filled the air and several humans were subdued forcefully. The queen intervened swiftly, her booming voice cutting through the commotion like thunder. "Order!" she commanded, her claws raised threateningly. "Any further disruption will result in immediate termination of this arrangement." The warning served its purpose, quelling the uprising before it could escalate further. Yet it also underscored the precariousness of the situation. Trust, if it existed at all, was paper-thin, ready to tear at the slightest provocation. Both sides walked a razor's edge, balancing between cooperation and conflict. As the initial shock of the halted ritual subsided, practical challenges emerged. How would the humans demonstrate their value without access to tools or resources? What criteria would the queen use to judge their efforts? And perhaps most importantly, how long would she allow this experiment to continue before reverting to the familiar comfort of tradition? These questions loomed large, casting long shadows over the fragile truce. Yet amidst the uncertainty, one thing became clear. The status quo had been irrevocably altered. Whether for better or worse remained to be seen, but the man's intervention had undeniably set events in motion that neither side could ignore. The stage was set for a reckoning, one that would test the limits of understanding, adaptation, and ultimately, survival. In the days that followed, the man worked tirelessly alongside the other captives, channeling their collective skills into projects designed to showcase humanity's ingenuity. Using scraps salvaged from the cavern, discarded tools, fragments of metal, and even remnants of previous sacrifices, they constructed rudimentary devices aimed at solving problems faced by the queen's domain. Water purification systems, rudimentary farming techniques adapted to the alien soil, and innovative methods for harvesting bioluminescent fungi were among the initiatives undertaken. Each project was crafted with care, intended not only to address immediate needs but also to demonstrate humanity's capacity for creativity and collaboration. The Queen watched these efforts unfold with growing fascination. At first, her observations were distant, conducted from the shadows as she delegated oversight to her attendants. But as the projects began yielding tangible results, her involvement deepened. She started appearing unannounced, inspecting the work with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Her crystalline crown pulsed erratically during these visits, betraying emotions she rarely displayed openly. Sometimes, she would ask questions, sharp, probing inquiries that revealed her keen intellect and strategic mindset. Other times, she simply observed, her glowing eyes tracing the intricate details of human craftsmanship. For the captives, these interactions were fraught with tension. While the Queen's interest signaled a potential shift in her perspective, it also heightened the stakes. Mistakes were not tolerated, and failures were met with swift reprimands. Yet paradoxically, this pressure fostered a sense of unity among the humans. Working together under such conditions forged bonds stronger than any chains, creating a microcosm of society driven by shared purpose. The man, now widely regarded as their leader, navigated these complexities with remarkable poise. He balanced encouragement with realism, ensuring that morale remained high even as challenges mounted. One evening, as the bioluminescent fungi cast their soft glow across the cavern, the Queen approached the man while he was overseeing the construction of a wind-power generator. Her sudden appearance startled the workers, who quickly resumed their tasks with renewed vigor. Ignoring them, she addressed him directly, her voice low but commanding. "Your efforts are intriguing," she admitted, her mandibles twitching slightly. "But they raise questions I cannot ignore." He turned to face her, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "Questions?" he prompted, his tone cautious yet respectful. "Yes," she replied, stepping closer. "Why do you lead them so willingly? Why risk your life, and theirs, for a cause that may ultimately fail?" Her question caught him off guard, forcing him to pause and consider his response. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady despite the weight of her scrutiny. "Because failure isn't an option. Not anymore. We've been given a chance, a rare opportunity to redefine what's possible. If we succeed, it won't just save us. It'll pave the way for something greater. Something neither of our species has experienced before." The Queen studied him intently, her expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, she extended one clawed hand toward the partially assembled generator. "Show me," she said simply. "Teach me how this works." The request stunned everyone present, including the man himself. For a moment, he hesitated, unsure whether this was a test or a genuine gesture of curiosity. But when he saw the sincerity in her glowing eyes, he nodded and began explaining the principles behind the device. As he spoke, the Queen listened intently, asking clarifying questions and occasionally touching components with surprising gentleness. Her attendants watched warily from the sidelines, clearly unsettled by this unprecedented display of engagement. Word of the Queen's involvement spread quickly among the captives, sparking a mixture of awe and apprehension. Some saw it as a sign of progress, proof that their efforts were making an impact. Others viewed it as a dangerous gamble, fearing that any misstep could reignite the cycle of violence. Despite these concerns, productivity soared as individuals poured their energy into perfecting their creations. The atmosphere in the cavern transformed, becoming less oppressive and more collaborative. Yet beneath this veneer of progress lurked unresolved tensions. Certain attendants, particularly those who had served longest, grew increasingly vocal in their opposition to the Queen's leniency. They argued that indulging the humans was a mistake, warning that it undermined the sacred order established by their ancestors. Their protests grew louder, culminating in heated debates during private councils with the Queen. Though she dismissed their concerns publicly, it was evident that their dissent weighed heavily on her mind. Meanwhile, the man found himself grappling with his own doubts. Late at night, when the cavern fell silent and the others slept, he often sat alone, staring into the flickering flames of the ritual fire. The enormity of his responsibility pressed down on him, compounded by the knowledge that failure would mean not just his death but the annihilation of everyone he had come to care about. He replayed the queen's words in his mind, searching for hidden meanings or ulterior motives. Was she genuinely interested in forging a new path, or was she merely biding her time until she deemed the experiment unworthy? These uncertainties haunted him, yet they also fueled his determination. Each morning, he rose with renewed resolve, channeling his fears into action. Under his guidance, the humans pushed forward, refining their inventions and expanding their scope. They introduced concepts like crop rotation, rudimentary medicine, and sustainable resource management, all tailored to the unique challenges of the alien environment. Slowly but surely, the cavern began to change, evolving from a place of dread into a hub of innovation. The queen noticed these changes too, though she rarely acknowledged them openly. Instead, she continued her inspections, her demeanor oscillating between curiosity and skepticism. On occasion, she would summon the man for private discussions, delving deeper into philosophical questions about coexistence, trust, and the nature of survival. These conversations were intense, often leaving both parties drained yet invigorated. Through them, the man gained insight into the queen's motivations, recognizing the burden of leadership she carried and the loneliness that accompanied it. As weeks turned into months, the fragile alliance between humans and aliens solidified, albeit imperfectly. Trust remained tenuous, tested daily by setbacks and misunderstandings. Yet amidst the struggles, moments of connection emerged, small victories that hinted at the possibility of lasting change. The man cherished these moments, holding on to them as reminders of why he had taken this perilous path in the first place. But even as hope blossomed, shadows loomed on the horizon. Rumblings of discontent among the attendants grew louder, threatening to destabilize the delicate balance. Whispers of rebellion echoed through the cavern, hinting at plots brewing in secret. And beyond the confines of the chamber, environmental pressures mounted, reminding everyone of the urgency driving their efforts. The man knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, perhaps insurmountable ones. But as he stood beside the queen one evening, watching the bioluminescent fungi illuminate the cavern in hues of green and blue, he allowed himself a fleeting moment of belief. Maybe, just maybe, they could forge a future together. A future defined not by sacrifice but by synergy. The fragile equilibrium that had taken root in the cavern began to fracture under mounting pressures. The attendants, emboldened by their growing dissatisfaction, convened clandestine meetings in shadowy alcoves, their guttural whispers echoing faintly through the stone walls. They spoke of rebellion, not against the humans, but against the queen herself. To them, her willingness to entertain the notion of coexistence was an unforgivable betrayal of their sacred traditions. Their loyalty, once unshakable, now wavered like a flame caught in a storm. Meanwhile, environmental challenges outside the cavern intensified. Torrential rains flooded the surrounding tunnels, carrying with them toxic runoff from the surface. The bioluminescent fungi, which had thrived for centuries, began to wither and die, dimming the chamber's natural light. Food supplies dwindled as crops failed, and tensions among both species escalated. For the first time, cracks appeared in the unity the man had worked so hard to foster. Arguments broke out among the captives, some accusing others of hoarding resources or shirking responsibilities. Desperation clawed at the edges of their resolve, threatening to unravel everything they had built. Amidst this chaos, the queen found herself increasingly isolated. Her attendants openly defied her orders, questioning her decisions in front of the humans, a grave breach of protocol. The drones, programmed to follow her commands without hesitation, began malfunctioning, their movements sluggish and erratic. Even the crystalline crown atop her head seemed dulled, its pulsating glow reduced to a faint flicker. She retreated to her private chambers more frequently, leaving the man to manage the deteriorating situation. One evening, as the cavern plunged into near darkness due to the failing fungi, the man sought her out. He found her seated on a jagged throne carved from obsidian, her massive frame slouched in a posture of exhaustion. Her glowing eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw not just power but vulnerability. "You're losing control," he said softly, stepping closer despite the palpable tension in the air. She let out a low growl, her claws flexing involuntarily. "Do you think I don't know that?" she snapped, her voice tinged with bitterness. "Every day, my people turn further against me. Every failure weakens my authority. And yet," she paused, her gaze dropping to the floor, "and yet, I cannot bring myself to return to the old ways. Not after seeing what your kind is capable of." Her admission startled him. In all their conversations, she had never revealed such doubt. It was as if the weight of leadership had finally broken through her stoic facade. He knelt before her, meeting her at eye level. "Then let us finish what we started," he urged, his tone firm yet compassionate. "Together, we can find a solution, not just for your people, but for ours too. But we need your strength now more than ever." For a long moment, she stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Very well," she rumbled. "But know this, if we fail, there will be no second chances." With renewed determination, the two forged a plan to address the crises threatening their fragile alliance. The man rallied the humans, organizing teams to tackle specific problems, repairing damaged infrastructure, developing alternative lighting sources using salvaged materials, and devising methods to purify the contaminated water flooding the tunnels. The Queen, meanwhile, confronted her attendants, issuing stern ultimatums to those who dared challenge her authority. She also dispatched drones to explore distant regions of the underground network, searching for untapped resources that could sustain them. Despite these efforts, the situation continued to worsen. A particularly violent storm caused part of the cavern ceiling to collapse, trapping several humans beneath the rubble. Panic erupted as survivors scrambled to dig them out, their cries mingling with the groans of shifting rock. The Queen arrived moments later, her presence commanding silence. Without hesitation, she joined the rescue effort, her immense strength clearing debris far faster than any human could. Together, they managed to free the trapped individuals, though not without casualties. That night, as the survivors mourned their losses, the Queen addressed the assembled crowd. Standing beside the man, she raised her claws high, silencing the murmurs that filled the chamber. "We are at a crossroads," she declared, her voice resonating with authority. "Our world is changing, and clinging to the past will only hasten our demise. The humans have shown us another way, a path fraught with uncertainty, yes, but also with potential. I ask you now, will you stand with me, or will you condemn us all to extinction?" Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. For a tense moment, no one responded. Then, one by one, the humans stepped forward, followed hesitantly by some of the attendants. Though not unanimous, the show of support bolstered the Queen's resolve. Even the most skeptical among them could see that returning to the old ways offered no salvation. In the days that followed, the collaboration deepened. Humans and aliens worked side by side, combining their knowledge and skills to overcome the challenges they faced. The man introduced agricultural techniques adapted to the harsh conditions, while the Queen shared insights about the planet's geology, helping locate hidden reserves of clean water. Together, they constructed a rudimentary hydroelectric system, harnessing the flow of flooded tunnels to generate power. Slowly but surely, the cavern began to transform once more, this time into something neither species had envisioned alone. Yet even as progress unfolded, lingering doubts remained. The attendants who had opposed the Queen still plotted in secret, their resentment simmering beneath the surface. One fateful night, as the man oversaw the final stages of the hydroelectric project, a group of dissenters launched a surprise attack. Armed with stolen ceremonial weapons, they targeted key structures, aiming to sabotage the fledgling alliance. Chaos erupted as alarms blared and flames engulfed vital equipment. The man fought alongside the humans and loyal attendants, defending their hard-won achievements against the onslaught. Amidst the fray, he spotted the leader of the dissenters, a veteran attendant whose mask bore the scars of countless battles. Their eyes locked, and for a brief moment, understanding passed between them. The attendant hesitated, lowering his weapon slightly. "It doesn't have to end this way," the man shouted over the din, extending a hand in peace. "We're stronger together." The attendant faltered, torn between duty and doubt. Before he could decide, however, the Queen intervened, her towering form cutting through the chaos like a force of nature. With a single swipe of her claws, she disarmed him, pinning him to the ground. "Enough!" she roared, her voice shaking the very foundations of the cavern. "This ends now." The remaining dissenters surrendered, overwhelmed by the combined might of their opponents. As order was restored, the Queen addressed the assembly once more, her tone resolute. "This rebellion has cost us dearly," she admitted, surveying the damage around her. "But it has also proven something. That change, though painful, is necessary. We cannot survive by clinging to fear and tradition. From this day forward, we move forward, together." The crowd erupted into cheers, humans and aliens alike celebrating their shared triumph. Though scars remained, both physical and emotional, the bond forged in adversity proved unbreakable. The man stood beside the queen, gazing out at the transformed cavern. Its walls glowed faintly with newly installed lights, powered by the hydroelectric system. Crops flourished in carefully tended plots, and the sound of laughter echoed where despair had once reigned. As the celebration unfolded, the queen turned to the man, her glowing eyes reflecting gratitude and respect. "You were right," she said simply. "Cooperation is our greatest strength." He smiled, bowing his head in acknowledgement. "And you were brave enough to embrace it." Together, they faced the future, not as conquerors or victims, but as partners united by a shared vision. The cycle of sacrifice had ended, replaced by a new era of hope and possibility. And though challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, they faced them with unwavering resolve, knowing that together, they could overcome anything.